Hi, my name is Itie, and welcome to Odejuma. Odejuma recognizes the magic of storytelling, from personal experiences to stories of adventure, from tales of resilience to finding joy in the simple things. This story seeks to inspire, entertain, and educate because there is power in the stories of everyday people, and these stories are worth telling. Hey y'all, welcome to Odejuma, the podcast that, talks about stories and people sharing the things that are very important and very personal to us. I'm very excited about my guest today. I've known her for a while. I feel very honored that, she has decided to grace me with her presence today. Hi Anu, how are you doing today?
Hi, Harry. I'm good. How are you?
I'm feeling really good. It's been a good week so far. Yeah, I feel really I'm in a good place mentally. I feel like I am more grounded than I have been over the past couple of months. So I really feel good. I want to say that. When you ask someone how you feeling, people tend to just say I'm fine. But thinking about it, I think I am really good. Yeah.
As you just said that, it occurred to me that I just maybe said, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" Like it's just so easy to like throw it back.
Yes, yes. Because I think we're socialized to like throw it back. That's like, how are you? I'm fine, right? But I've been thinking very well, very critically about my responses over the past couple of months. Because for a while I wasn't really good, and so thinking about how am I going to respond? How am I going to if I show up in spaces with people? What do I say? I'm feeling, So, but anyways, that is just
Well done. I like that you're being more intentional about your responses. Lately I've been moving between I'm okay or I'm doing my best.
mm,
So that's just how I've been floating. So yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you for joining. And Odejuma is the new podcast. And I feel like you kind of like know my journey already through like doing media stuff and being like involved and everything. And I think that one of the reasons why I really wanted to feature you on this podcast was because I am so inspired by your work and how you like show up in spaces. I've seen you work. I've seen you in work mode. I've seen you in friend mode. While they are very distinct, I feel like you move with a lot of intention through those spaces. And I feel like there's a lot that folks can learn from you just based on your person. And so I think I'm going to start for folks that who might not really know you or familiar with you or your work. Like, who is Anu?
Okay, hi folks that might not really know me. I am Aanu Jide-Ojo. I am a clinical psychologist and LGBT affirming psychologist. That's very important to me. I've worked within the NGO space, have had my private practice and so on for about 5 years now. And what I do is work with people navigating their identity conversations with themselves, with others, and with the world. So whether it's religious identity, sexual gender identity, neurodivergent identity, my work sort of moves within the intersections of all of that. I like work with them with that. It's like from an affirming standpoint, whether there have been trauma that have come from that, and just like move from that murky space to a space of clarity. Outside of work mode, I love rom-coms. I love reading, whether it's like TV shows, whatever. I'm a huge fan of love and stories and love stories. I'm also a
Mhm.
friend, like Harry said. I carry my friends on my head, and I feel like I am their platonic wife. And I'm an elder sister to a very dramatic baby girl who is like 24, and I'm like, "You're 24. I remember you being born." But I love her. I love her to bits. And outside of all of that, I'm doing my best. And I'm currently in a season where I'm optimizing for the best case scenario and
Mm.
working in faith to achieve that. So that's me in a nutshell.
That is so real. Optimizing for the best case scenario. I think that that's something that I would, put in my head. As you were speaking, you said that it's very important that people know that you're an LGBT Q plus affirming therapist. Why is that important for folks to know?
To be honest, that is what started my therapy journey. Relationship with myself, with my individual growth and my career, they are very intertwined. And the first 2 to 3 years of my career, I actually worked in marketing, even though I had like my background in psychology and clinical psychology. While I was in school, let's say representation was just not great, and I'm a Libra, so you have to package it well and like sell it and
Mm-hmm.
sell it to me. So I saw
Mm-hmm.
people that had been in the field for like 10 to 12 years, and I'm like, this is not me. So I was like, okay, I'm a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I will go the writing route, but thankfully, actually, my parents were just like, we don't know where a master's degree in clinical psychology, in creative writing would take you. Your background is in psychology. How about you do something in psychology? So I was like, okay, I will do clinical psychology. So I did a master's in clinical psychology and I worked in marketing for about 3 years. But I always had that like skill of listening to people, understanding constructs and so on. But people will share their experiences with therapists, especially like queer people online, and they'll talk about like just it not being affirming to it being homophobic, bringing in like religious components to it. And I just remember feeling this sort of vehement like rage, like you are trained to not do that. You are not supposed to do that. Like, and I was just like looking for a way to get in. Like, if I had a way in, I would do things differently. So I started volunteering, and thankfully one blessed day where I was having a very horrible day at work, I saw a post at the Initiative for Equal Rights. I was looking for a clinical psychologist, and I applied 2 weeks, no, months later, actually. I did the interview and I got in. And that is where I thought like I would come in and do this whole almost savior thing, like, oh, I'm the therapist that is non-judgmental. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect that I would learn a lot about myself, about my own growth. I moved from
Mm-hmm.
calling myself bi to being queer to just like, see, I'm a lesbian, like, thanks, but no thanks. Like,
Yeah.
and it was just like that coming out to myself, first of all, and also like making friends, like making lifelong friends that, knew me for who I was, like the whole night. So my friends have seen me shift from just being very unsure about myself to being very outspoken. And that's, I guess, like understanding the politics of queerness, understanding how that intersects with your mental health, with gender expression, with everything. It just like flowed through my work and it just made me who I am. So it's such a big deal for me to like claim that. Like it's not just like me being a therapist, like I'm an affirming therapist. Yeah.
That's real. That's real. And I love that. I'm just curious about like your journey through going through as someone who was coming into terms with their own queerness, but also deciding to work for an organization that's catered to queer people, and finding yourself through that work. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was that? What did that look like as you were helping people come to terms with themselves? You were also coming to terms with yourself
With
also.
myself too, yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually my first time talking about that on any platform. So, okay, great. Like I've always, I guess, known that I was not straight. I didn't know what my identity was, but I've always known since maybe 10 that I was not straight. But growing up in a very religious household, I immediately connected that to this is wrong. This is not right. And I've also always had like deep friendships, but because I knew that I was not straight and being straight was not right, I was always
Mhm.
scared that it would be contagious and it was like something that I needed to stay away from people from. So I weirdly thought that, I'll have a guy best friend because like if whatever happens to the guy best friend, that is okay. But if it
Mhm.
happens to like a girl, then it is my fault. So there was just that internalized, I say struggle or homophobia or whatever. And I really didn't date throughout like secondary school, university. Someone walked up to me in Covenant where I attended and she like straight up asked me like, are you a lesbian? And I was like, no, because I'd not come out to myself and I'd not even had
Mhm.
any romantic or sexual experience. Then I like now I can think of experiences and say like, oh, and you had a crush on this person, but
Mhm.
compared to holding my neck, I couldn't even name that as a crush. I would just be like, she is just so cute and be like so like hyper fixated with the person. And that happened to me twice. Like the first time she someone walked up to me and I was like, no, God forbid, blah blah blah. And then I was telling a friend, like a guy friend, I think like shortly after I graduated in like 2013, and I was telling him about this like girl that I really admired. And I was like, she is so driven. She is so, and I was just like going on and on and on. And he was just like, I don't, can I ask you a question? I'm not judgmental or anything. I was like, are you queer? And I was like, no, why do you think so? And interesting, like I told him that I had a crush on him, but he was just very, was just like, okay, if you say so. And it was, and again, now thinking about those two experiences, I can say that the things I look for in like in a partner are the things I was gushing about with that person now.
Mm,
And then fast forward to, I guess, doing my master's degree and just not being able to like hide it. Like at some point, it just keep popping up. Like, I think I am bisexual. I think I am
mm,
bisexual. And my like then best friend would say like, no, that's not good. That's not God. That's not whatever, because he was very religious. And I'll say, okay. And then I try to pray it away because God doesn't want me to be
mm,
queer. So I will go to church and I'll pray, 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 pray. But it was just not going away. And then I don't even know what happened in like 2019. At some point, it just shifted from praying the gay way to praying about my future wife. Like it
mm,
appears that this is not going away. So is it okay if I talk to you about who I want to marry in the future? And I met a lot of peace with that. And the moment I had that sort of internal peace about talking to God about my future wife, it just felt like, okay, this doesn't look like you're about to strike me with thunder
mm,
anytime soon. And I started like consuming like queer theology content, just sort of trying to find something like what does God have to say about any of these things. And that's just, I guess like that is how I started coming out to myself, like accepting that I was a queer person. And I still held on to that bisexual tag. Then later in the year, in December, I went on a date with this guy and we had a good evening, I guess. But I always notice that, like, with guys, I'll feel very nauseous if they try to be physical with me. Like, I would almost want, and I thought that everybody was experiencing that. So I'll talk to them about it. Like, I feel nauseous when I'm with you, but it doesn't look like it's because it's something you did. Is this something that everybody was experiencing? Because again, religiosity and I guess purity culture. I was also a virgin, so I didn't know what
mm,
anybody was doing. So I was like, is it maybe it's because I'm sinning that I'm feeling nauseous. I didn't connect that with you're not attracted to these people. That is why you feel nauseous. And
mm.
then a guy like went on a date. He came to my house and I was just looking at him, just being. He was a perfect gentleman. I looked at him. I was like, I think I'm a lesbian.
Oh
And he was
no.
just like, okay, yeah, because I previously told him that I was bisexual.
Mm,
And he was like, and in fact, interesting, I told one of my friends that, Ellen, I think I'm bisexual. And she was like, and the day you're looking, I feel like you're a lesbian, but circle back when you update. When you update yourself, like, let me know. But I will accept the bisexuality for you. She was the first person that
mm,
clocked me. And she's straight. And then so every time I look at Ellen, it's like, shout out to friends that know you.
mhm,
Because I was not like a man hating whatever. It was just like, she was like, I mean, there's no enthusiasm when you talk about like anybody. So I was just like, okay.
mm,
So this person was in my house and I was like, I think I'm a lesbian. He was like, okay, that's fine. And, like that was it. That's literally how I came out to myself. So when I started talking to clients and like observing them and their journey, some of them reflected mine, some of them did not. But a lot, there was just that, understanding of like compared to like I must be straight or I must be attracted to men in some bits, and not even to seem like stereotypical. Sometimes I'll talk to a client that very masculine presenting, very all of the things, and I'm like, I understand that gender expression does not necessarily mean like sexual identity, but sometimes this is giving.
mhm,
But whenever you're ready, like we'll go,
mm,
and I guess being in an organization where queerness was almost the norm, where queerness was accepted as the default. All of a sudden, my world moved from 90% straight to 90% queer, or even like 95% queer. The conversation I was having around like queer people being centered and like it was almost like compulsory queerness from compulsory like heterosexuality. It just made me like have that mental space to ask myself questions. And now that I was working with like clients that were queer, whether they had come out to themselves and people or were in the journey or were just like navigating other things. And, like they had already had like their years of experience dating women and they were just like talking to me about their experience. Like there was that work for me to like keep reading about these experiences and just keep updating. And it was just like this is teaching me so much about this whole world that I never permitted myself to learn about, but now
mm,
I can. So that was sort of like my journey with myself. Yeah. And I think like flashback to when I was like praying about my sexuality. At some point, I ran into like queer theology, like the Guardian theologian Kim Daly, and there was this line that she said like, I'm a woman loving woman because it's the will of God for me to be. And that just like sealed it for me because I'm a person of faith. I don't bring that to my practice because again, religious trauma exists, and I'm not a faith-based therapist, but in my personal life, I am a person of faith and it's a big deal for me. So when it shifted from, oh, I moved from that mental space of God is tolerant of my queerness to God is affirming of my queerness, and it's almost the will of God for me to be, or it is. It just made it like very sealed. Like I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I'm okay. And that was it for me.
That is very powerful. I feel like because I relate. I went to Covenant too. Went to Covenant University, and I feel like throughout like my journey towards also accepting my queerness, I also read some queer theology and tried to understand what queerness meant from someone who grew up in the church, was raised in the church, and all that good stuff. And I don't know who. And this is not even like a queer artist; it's a regular Christian artist who had a song and the name of the song was Jesus is for Everybody. And I don't think that they meant it from like a queer perspective. I think they meant it from a very like Jesus loves everyone and he's welcoming of all of us, as people. But I think that if something that is very important for like folks who choose to continue to be in their Christian faith and hold on to their queerness is to understand that Jesus is for you as much as he's for the heterosexual cisgender person. Like Jesus is for everybody. I'm coming to terms in understanding that, which is what you've also shared in your story too. And I also just find it very fascinating how your journey is one of deep searching and deep finding. Like you searched and you found your answers. So that I really love that. And thank you for sharing that. I know you say you haven't shared it before. How are you feeling about sharing this story?
I think less scared out than I would have been in last year because I came out to my mom this January.
Oh.
And as someone that has been out to literally everybody, I feel like the closet is glass. I don't like tweet whatever, but if you know, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I was one to seek parental attention or permission for anything. But there was still a level of freedom that came with that. And she was like, just not reject you. So I would not reject you. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
so what is okay to share? Can I share open heavens with you? Yes. Okay. Can I tell people about it? I was like, no, if I want to come out to people, I'll come. I was like, okay. Can I call you Okomi, which is like a popular endearment? I was like, yeah, call me Okomi. And she shares open heavens. She checks in on me. And it was a level of freedom that was unlocked that I didn't even know that I needed. So it was just like, you can't beat me. My mommy likes me. So that's it.
Yeah, I think that there's something very powerful when a parent who you love deeply affirms and is like, they don't even need to be like, I'm gonna go with you to the Pride Parade
Pirate,
and wave a
yeah.
flag. All they need to say is, I love you. I wish you the best. I'm here for you if you need me.
Mhm.
That is enough in itself for
Yeah.
someone who is an African or someone who is also religious also. So I'm really
Absolutely.
glad you have that.
Absolutely. I think at some point I just let go of that idea of like the perfect response. Like she's not going to be, I see you and I love you. You know how people do it in like movies? It was so like very African and very religious. It was almost too perfect. I was like, I like that response. Like, love me as Jesus loves me. And that's okay with
Mm,
me. Yeah.
that's real. And it may not be, and it's perfect for you.
It's perfect for
Uh,
me. Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's what is
And
important.
that's what it is. Yeah.
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 That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I feel like speaking of going back to your work as a therapist, like the goal of us therapy is to like is trauma informed, is inclusive and affirming. The world is, we are in scary times and I feel like we are moving to a space of deep conservatism. And you see with people you thought you knew, who you were friends with, who you thought were open minded, and all of a sudden they are spewing rhetoric that you're like, damn, I didn't know you felt that way. And so, why is it important right now for your care that you provide to folks when it comes to your mental health care that you provide to folks? Why is it important for it to be trauma informed and inclusive in this moment that we're currently living in right now?
I think now more than ever, like therapy space is It's almost sacred because
Wow.
one, it requires a lot of vulnerability for someone to come in and share of themselves. You don't
Mm,
know this person and you don't know their journey. You just know that they are trained and they can help you. And it's one of the few spaces that you get to choose.
yeah.
So, it has to be in its at its best almost harmless because like you don't want to put someone in a position where like they're choosing their harm, and very few people have like the privilege of community, of support, of belonging, especially in a world where we are so connected. There's a paradox of connection. Like we follow each other online, but we don't really see each other. So isolation is like climbing up, and there are very few spaces where people allow themselves to be seen and people allow themselves to be vulnerable. So a therapy space has to be like one that provides a level of belonging, that one that provides a level of understanding, that shows people that yes, I see you and I hear you, and I'm going to work with you on this journey. And it's also going to be very difficult because, as you've mentioned, the world is getting very scary. And unfortunately, for a lot of queer people, it has always been scary. It's just like blown up now, and like the camera is shining now. But from my 5 years of talking to people, like people have talked about like conversion practices, they've talked about isolation, being thrown out of their families, like experiencing financial trauma, working twice as hard to like build the life that they have now. So they have always experienced this. And now that they are getting to this point where they now want to heal from all of that like harm, all of the wounds that they have gone through, you don't want to multiply that. You want to like actually contribute to the post traumatic growth that they are rooting for, that they are like going for. So that's why it's like more important now more than ever. Like that level of belongingness and safety, it's needed.
And speaking of what you're saying about like we've been going through this before, like this is it has been our reality. Especially if you
Mm-hmm.
grew up in like a country that is not very affirming. So say
Yes,
Nigeria, for example, with all
absolutely.
the anti-gay laws and everything that is like all encompassing with moving through that system. And so it's just well on a different level and it's more global now
Yes.
than it was when it was just at a very national or local level specific to folks who were in those types of countries.
Yes.
With everything now, I feel like there is a need for querying therapy as well. That is the convo that happens quite often. How do we make therapy and not just for folks who are very intentional like you are and saying that, oh, I want to be inclusive, trauma informed, accessible, but even for like regular people, you're like, there, you could be if you're in the US, for example, you can only access therapies, you're a therapist that is licensed to practice in the city or the state that you're living in, right? And so it's like, and then your insurance has to cover the therapy, because
Mm-hmm.
therapy is not
Mm-hmm.
cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, I live in a predominantly white neighborhood, or I live in a predominantly a neighborhood or a city that has people with different ethnicities than I do, right? Or maybe a lot of queer folks are not in the part of town that I live in. But I still need therapy and I still need to see a therapist and I have to go with the one that's available to me. How can we get to a space where we can have all these folks have a basic understanding of what it is to be a queer person? So it's not that, oh, you have to hold my identities to be able to communicate with me and
Mm-hmm.
treat me or provide solutions to or recommend solutions to some of my issues, but because you have an understanding of what the issues are, and because we've adequately queered therapy, if that's the word,
Mm-hmm.
that could be very helpful. Do you have any recommendations on how we can get there, how we can move there more intentionally?
Absolutely. I think that that is one a very good question because a lot of people actually have that experience where they're working with when they think of like identity, they think, oh, I'm a black person. I would like to work with a black therapist, but there are also like other layers to it. I think the first is understanding like the population that you're working with. It's one thing to
Mm-hmm.
understand, I guess, the theories, like if you're a CBT therapist or if you're ACT, whatever, there's that. But there's also the level of understanding the population that you're working with and understand their specific struggle and saying, like, how does this disorder that this person is presenting with connect to this struggle? That
Mm-hmm.
is like day one, because if you generalize it and say, oh, everybody experiences depression, these are the tips that you should use, blah, 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 without understanding that depression might come from an identity issue. Depression might come from a sense of perfectionism because they've had to like work twice as hard to get to where they are. Or depression might come from like body image issues or body dysmorphia issues, like it's very common within like the gay community, for instance. And how you can say like, oh, I'm just going to like focus on body dysmorphia and like try to treat that. But how does body dysmorphia connect to the idea of belonging, to the idea of finding partnership, to the idea of finding community? And how can you pay attention to like those intersecting things? So it's one, being a student of almost like your patient, but not putting them in a position to do the work for you. So someone is presenting and they fill out the client intake form, like do that homework to understand like how do these two things intersect, like understand the population. And so like it can also be with like the intake form, like what are your pronouns? What name do you feel comfortable being called? Do you have like a change room where they'll feel comfortable like changing into, if it's an in-person session? Do they feel safe talking about specific things, like checking into their environment, like performing like check-in tools and so on to like get them? I think like those are like also basic things to understand to make them like signal that you're safe and they are safe as well. And if there are situations where like you slip up either with burnouts or whatever, just like checking with yourself and keep it going rather than putting them in a position where they have to be like, oh no, it's okay, it's fine. And then they're now like the ones like soothing you. You're the therapist and you're the one that is providing support there. So that's it. But there's a level of understanding like the technique and the skill. There's a level of understanding the disorder, but zoom out to understand the population and even further zoom out to understand like how that population intersects with the community around them. That way you'll be able to provide like support to them, because the kind of support you give to kind of support that I would give to someone living in Lagos, let's say even like Lekki phase 1 in Lagos, because there are different kinds of Lagos, right? And the kind of like recommendations I would give to them will be very different from the kind of recommendation I would give someone living in Yaba. Furthermore, someone living in Aba, what safety looks like to each of them will differ. What community will look like to each of them will differ. Like the kind of like problem solving tools and all of that would differ. Sometimes we'll have to like do therapy, like, can you do it while you're taking a walk? Right? And you have to pay attention to, okay, there's a lot of noise around them, but they're outside of their house, so they have to feel safe compared to, oh, this person is alone and they can just like talk and feel free and all of that. So the kind of like accommodations that you make in each situation, those are the things that you pay attention to as a core therapist. So all of those things matter.
That is so insightful. Thank you for sharing that. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about like how depending on access to education or access to information, a lot of folks who are queer might not want to go to therapy or might not feel safe sharing about their experiences, or there's just a negative. I mean, it's one thing to even get like Black folks to go to therapy just in general because of like the negative connotation in Nigeria. They'll be like, oh, they are doing you from your village, that kind of, that's the narrative. And, oh, if you say you're in therapy, it's a negative thing, right? And so are there ways that we can encourage folks? And then I know that this is a bit cliche, but how do we get folks to show up and go to therapy?
I think that it's a huge thing, like financial access to therapy and the education required to even like consider therapy as an option. I think that that's where I love that NGOs like the Initiative for Equal Rights exists. And other NGOs like IJSRH and other NGOs that are doing the work to host community events, like do movies, TV shows, podcasts, all of that, because to a large extent, those things penetrate through barriers faster than therapy. And I think that the way they did like the campaign for HIV, AIDS, polio, and so on back in the day with like, and I need to know, blah, blah, blah. We might need more of that for like mental health and other stigmas attached to therapy, because at the end of the day, when people are staying away from therapy, it's not because they hate themselves, it's because at the very least, people want to feel safe. And you have to communicate that therapy, at least healthy therapy, affirming therapy, is a form of safety for them. So how can we like partner with like media institutions that are affirming, partner with like different spaces that are affirming to like communicate that. So I think like this is where like I would tap in NGOs and other people with more networks within all of these communities to like go in, Because if I just like dive in and say like, oh yeah, mental health is blah blah blah, without hosting a movie, without hosting workshops, without hosting like a gala or something that is like creating a sort of bridge, then it's like, why is a stranger talking to me?
That's real. And I like your reference for I need to know. I think that there was a very growing up in Nigeria, there was like a huge campaign for, to have folks, be safe with sex, with condom, with the whole who get this raincoats, that
Yeah. Yeah.
that advert with I need to know, which Funke Akindele used to be was like the main character on, and how that show really talked a lot about gender and sexuality. Because I remember there was an episode, I don't know if it was when, because I know after the Funke Akindele, they had like younger people come into the show for a bit. I don't know if it was during that time or it was still with the BC era, where it was I need to know. I know they had a radio version, so I'm mixing it up. But I remember one of them asked their mother about, oh, this person says she's a lesbian. What does that mean? And I was like, oh, she's a lesbian because she's like, and I remember watching it back then and thinking, that is interesting. It was a very odd deviation from how Nollywood talked
Mm.
about sexuality, where it was very like demonized. It was like a bad girl or the Ron's girls that were doing that were lesbians. They were doing lesbianism in
Yeah,
quotes.
that's reality is like, okay.
Yeah,
Oh my
So I
God.
feel like the idea of using the media to educate and to provide that level of breaking down these concepts for folks, I think that's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something that you did that I thought was very, very innovative and very like I think I really hope that you get to even like I do big physical copies. You released in 2023 your journal, and you called it Messily Living.
Yeah.
And it's a therapy journal. First of all, I feel like it's beautiful to know that, you're like, we all have messy lives and that's okay.
Yeah.
The title already kind of like starts from like a very affirming place, right? Can you tell me about the inspiration behind, the journal, and like, why does everyone need a copy? I feel everyone needs a copy, but I want you to tell people why they need to have the Messily Living Therapy Journal.
So it was actually inspired by my clients, where like we work together, and a question that I asked my clients is like, how have you been since the last session? Tell me high points and low points and significant events. And sometimes they'll be like, something happened, but I can't remember. Oh, I should have written it down. I should have written it down. And it was just sort of like playing like, okay, so do we want to have a diary? Do we want to have something? Like, do we want to have it all documented? Like, and I also have the privilege of working with people long term. So sometimes like up from like 2021 till now. And it's just such a journey. And sometimes I feel like it would be nice to have you document that growth yourself and watch you like leave that out loud. Like, oh, last year I was exploring this, I was struggling with this, and this time I'm no longer struggling with this. This is where I am in my journey, or these are the questions I want to ask ahead of my next sessions. These are some of the challenges that I had while processing the last session. This is something that this is a feedback I want to give my therapist. This is like, just like something like that is very documented and makes you feel less overwhelmed, because like when you come into therapy sometimes it feels like, should I talk about my family, or is it my finances, or is it my relationship, or is it this, or should I talk about, and it's just like it can feel all over the place. How can you sit down and then like deliberately say, I'm going to touch on these three things in the last session, these are the highlights of the last session, blah blah, and you feel a little bit more arranged and collaborative with yourself first and also with your therapist. So that's why I created it.
That is pretty cool. How's the response been so far?
It has been amazing for people that have used it. I feel like I should do a better job of marketing it, but every time I say like, oh my God, I know, I'm so glad that you created it. And I'm like, thank you so much. It's very scary, like creating something and putting it out there, but I'm
Yeah.
glad that it exists and that people that need it, like find it. So grab a copy. Yeah.
Yeah. I will also like put like a link for folks to be able to get and download,
Thank you.
purchase and download. I think it'll be very helpful to share. We're gonna lighten things up a little bit with some trivia questions.
Okay.
You had a podcast and you called it "Sorry, I Only Read Rom-Coms."
Yes.
You're very like creative with these names. In light of your of that podcast, what is your favorite rom com?
Oh, what is my favorite rom-com? No, why is nothing coming to mind now? You know what? I will go with Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Okay.
Or The Idea of Us. It came out last year, blah blah, but I actually really loved like both. So Red, White, and Royal Blue, yeah.
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Still on rom coms, what is which character in a rom com do you identify with a lot? Do you most identify with?
I would say Gigi in the L Word, but like the Gigi that dated Danny, not the Gigi that
Mm.
dated that chaotic therapist. If you watched it, I don't like it's not a rom-com, it's very messy, but
Okay.
I liked her relationship with Danny. Like she was very straightforward. Where and that I don't know why they ruined it. Like she was very straightforward with Danny. I feel like they had healthy communication pattern. Like she called Danny out on her bullshit, but at the same time she was like in Danny's corner, very loyal. And they made each other uncomfortable in a good way. And I just loved how like that arc happened. I hate that they ruined that relationship, but I would say Gigi. Yeah.
What is it? TV writers always, find a way to ruin a good thing. No, no hate to the TV writers. I love y'all.
You know, if they want to bring it back, they should bring it back. We'll still watch, but we'll give them small side eye.
Small side eye, just right there. I'm compiling a playlist for this podcast. I'm going to call it the Odejuma playlist. And it will be featured with like songs with like guests that are going to be on here. And so, do you have any three songs? So, what are the top three songs on your playlist? We're gonna add that to the podcast, to our Odejuma playlist. What are the top three songs right now that you're listening to?
Top three songs right now. Oh, that's a good one. So the first one is Breaking Point by Leo Thomas.
Okay,
Then I'm in my R&B era actually. So I've been loving a lot of R&B lately. Then Touch Me by Victoria Monet.
okay.
Yeah, that's a very song. Oh, which one is going to be the third one? Two Hands to Heaven, Beyonce.
That's
Yeah.
a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah. Two Hands to Heaven, yeah.
Okay. What is your dream travel destination?
Japan. I
Mm.
need I need a month in Japan. I'll just go there for the fashion. I know like the food is there, but oof, yeah,
I
Japan.
feel like the fashion is kind of like in your wheelhouse, like because I know like it's your aesthetic.
It's my
So
aesthetic exactly. Like it's my aesthetic. Like and it will just
yeah,
be like a meeting of minds. Like I
yeah.
just need to live there for like 1 to 3 months, and my
Okay.
wardrobe will love me forever. Yeah.
Shout out to Japan. Shout out to Japan. And finally, what is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, guilty pleasure. Do I have a guilty pleasure? What qualifies as a guilty pleasure?
Like for some folks, their guilty pleasure is reality TV. So maybe they like a particular show, maybe they like baddies or they like the, housewives. Even I feel like housewives is now much more a cultural phenomenon as opposed to a guilty pleasure.
Mhm.
Or maybe they like to eat like ice cream with like Eba or something.
Wow. I feel like
I
I'm
don't
missing
know.
out on Real Housewives because I never really got into it, and I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of the isms attached to it.
Hmm.
And I've not really been into reality TV lately. But I would say Criminal Minds.
Yeah, I feel like I'm here for a good detective show. There is Elsbeth right now, which is a spin-off of so there's The Good Wife. I don't remember The Good
Yeah,
Wife.
yeah, yeah. The Good Wife and the Good
Good
Fight, and then
Fight. So now
I like
there's Elsbeth.
Elsbeth. I like
Yeah.
Elsbeth, but I've not seen the show, but I like the character. She was so
Yeah.
quirky.
Yeah. Elsbeth, the show takes it to a new level. I feel like out of all the three, The Good Wife, The Good Fight, and Elsbeth is definitely my favorite. Out of all three of them,
Interesting.
is
Okay.
Elsbeth, then The Good Fight, then The Good Wife, which is interesting because it's like The Good Wife is the main,
It's a
you
main
know,
event. But that's
uh,
like kudos to the creator there because it looks like it got better as it went on.
yeah.
Unlike the Vampire Diaries that just the originals was great, then Legacy was just horrible.
Legacies, I don't know what happened. I had to stop watching. I'm like, what is going on in the show? It just went from like A to Z. And Vampire Diaries was really, I love the Vampire Diaries. I went to there's the way they shot the show, the it's a
Mystic
city
Falls.
in Georgia. Yeah, where Misty Falls
Okay.
was based. The city in Georgia. I went there. I saw the town clock. Went to the
Oh,
Mystic Grill.
cool. Nice.
We saw Elena's house. We saw the Lockwood Mansion. A couple of places. It was really nice. But like just understanding that from like the vampire originals was kind of good. I liked it. But also as the shows were kind of wrapping up, they kept getting really bad. And the legacies just was that was where it went to. So yeah. So yeah, the creators of The Good Wife, they did a good job in evolving the stories of the shows. Yeah. Well, before we finally wrap up, is there anything that you would want to share with our listeners? Anything, any final thoughts you want to share um, before we wrap up this episode?
No, take care of yourself. You're doing your best. You actually are doing your best because like things can get really tricky and hard. I'm learning these days like that the opposite of like depression is not really joy, it's hope. So rather than thinking of what can spark joy, think of like what can inspire hope and go for that. So
Oh,
yeah.
that is very important. Thank you so much, Anu, for sharing. And, I'm really happy that, we get to experience you in this lifetime, get to see some of the things that you're doing. And I feel like for where we are coming from, and I think that we need more affirming therapist, and they don't even have to be queer. It's a plus that you're queer, but I feel like we need more people who understand the journey and what it's like to live and be as a Nigerian who is growing and navigating life as a queer person. There's so many layers that we can dive deep into, but we won't have the time for. But yeah, but someone who is, skilled in the work that you're doing will be able to help folks navigate through that. So thank you for your work.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad you exist too.
No problem. And thank you all for listening. Until the next podcast, Odejuma.